A volume for this subject alone is necessary. These chapters must necessarily be limited to the emphasizing of the one purpose for which these groups of chapters have been written, namely, of demonstrating that the power of mass to attract is as variable as its power to generate light pulsations into appearance as accumulated potential. Also that the power of mass to repel is as variable as its power to degenerate light pulsations into disappearance as discharged potential. The journey from the soft, amorphous, complex crystal to the hard, simple one is a centripetal one, in which the intended accumulation starts toward its ultimate vortex from many directions and in many planes, which register the amorphous violet of red-blue in color, and ends in one direction and one plane which registers yellow in color. The return journey back to softness from hardness starts from the bisexuality of a one-plane position, arrives at the base of the female cone of energy, divided in many directions, and registers in the violet of blue-red in color. If it is true that the attraction of gravitation and the repulsion of radiation are sufficiently variable to cause great differences in hardness of crystallization, and also great differences in form, according to the potential position of the crystallizing mass, the 10th dimension must be taken into account in writing the laws of gravitation and radiation. Next chapter, expressions of gravitation and radiation. Plane and ecliptic, the 16th and 18th dimension. Plane and ecliptic are two of the most important dimensions. Each is worthy of a volume in itself. This chapter, therefore, will deal briefly with these dimensions, as this series of chapters is written primarily for the purpose of showing the relation of all dimension of mass to the phenomena of gravitation and radiation. The outward journey from plane to mass and back again to a plane is a journey from appearance, from inertia, to non-dimension, to the inertial bisexual position of formed mass at 4++, and back again to disappearance in inertia of non-dimension. The dimensionless universe knows neither plane nor mass. The universe of dimension knows infinite variety of both plane and mass. In the evolution of mass from the inertial plane of the concept of mass, plane evolves in orderly periodicity as mass evolves. It has heretofore been written that the conquest of either opposite in any expression of force by the other is always accomplished by a simulation of the attributes of the one conquered. Mass overcomes the concept of plane in the non-dimensional universe of inertia by simulating plane in an objective universe of motion. When motion begins the process of overcoming inertia, the plane of forming mass is infinitely complex. When motion has completely overcome inertia to the full extent of the energy of any particular action, the plane of formed mass is infinitely simple. It is then in one plane, the plane of the equator of each mass in a system. During the evolution of plane from the complexity of many directions to the simplicity of one, the forming corpuscles of systems revolve in many orbits, but change their position until they eventually revolve in one plane. When the one plane is reached in formed mass, the general active action has reached its maximum. Radioactive reaction then preponderates. It has been heretofore written that mass attains an appearance of stability through motion and retains that appearance only by a continuation of motion. All expressions of energy are represented by varying stages of evolution, each of which is registered in each dimension. When the maximum of any expression of energy is reached at the overtone position of the wave, the one simple, unstable plane of motion begins its complexing into many planes. The open complex condition of forming mass in the nebulous, shapeless state is that in which the area of variation in plane approximates 90 degrees to the equatorial plane of maximum motion, at which position mass appears and disappears as form. The closed and simple condition of formed mass is the solid spherical state, is that in which there is no area of variation in the ecliptic or equatorial plane, which marks the limitations of the expression of energy which fathered any particular mass. It has elsewhere been explained that the opposing cones of energy disappear by expansion into equatorial planes and by contraction into poles of rotation. As these cones contract and expand, all parts of each system revolve around a forming nucleus in the gradually lessening and increasing expansion of plane area. This expansion, which differs in all systems in orderly periodicities, is exemplified in our solar system in that effect which we call the zodiacal area. In our solar system, the area of plane expansion of the ecliptic for major masses within the system is approximately 8 degrees on either side of the solar equatorial plane. All major masses within our system must continue their journeys within this area. Beyond this area, only those very much smaller masses, such as asteroids and comets, are permitted to extend their ecliptic planes and expand their plane areas toward their disappearance. These smaller masses and comets might be likened to the insignificant leakage of rare gases through even well-fitting piston rings in an engine. Their potential is too low to keep them within the defined area, and the comets are so lacking in density that their ability to regenerate and contract from hundreds of thousands of miles in diameter at their aphelons to 100 miles at their perihelons makes of them nomad wanderers throughout great expanses of our swirling solar hurricane. In their continued search for true potential positions for the rapidly changing potentials of these expanding masses, their alternate inhalations and exhalations are like the gaspings of a dying man. Generative inhalations greatly contract the volumes of highly expanding mass of low potentials, and radiative exhalations greatly expand them. This accounts for the tremendously eccentric orbits of the comets and the expanded ecliptic areas of such small masses as the asteroids. All mass is but a reflection of its concept. Mass is conceived in inertia and reflected as the matured image of its concept at an angle of 90 degrees to the plane of concept. The immatured or growing image of concept is recorded in plane at angles which vary from the beginning of mass formation in the inertial plane of non-dimension in concept to the completion of mass formation in the inertial plane of maximum dimension in mass, which is at the equator of mass. Just as the idea of man is reflected as the image of man on the plane of the water's surface at a 90-degree angle from the objects reflected, so are the matured concepts of universal ideal reflected in the universe of maximum dimension, which lies at an angle of 90 degrees to the universe of non-dimension. Growth is ideal evolving in transit to its maturing point in a reflecting plane at the equator of mass and devolving back again to inertia. All mass is a reflection of the concept of that mass.